Emotions which are suppressed will manifest as physical ailments, if not today, tomorrow.
So, your journey has spanned medicine, modeling, acting, and now wellness. What was the common thread holding all these different identities together?
When I participated in Mrs. World, when I decided to go to Las Vegas to represent India, a lot of questions were asked, like a lot of eyebrows were raised to say, hey, you're married, what's the point of doing a beauty pageant now?
So, tell me, glamour often hides loneliness because you know how they say it's lonely at the top. You've seen all of it. Can you explain what was that like for you?
See, loneliness, it's not really directly connected to glamour. Loneliness can strike anybody at any time.
How do our emotions manifest in the body and how can we truly heal?
They're like, oh, you're single. Do you feel lonely all the time? And I'm like, I'm single, I'm alone. But I'm not lonely because I have so much that's going on. I created Marvelous Mrs. India. We are on our third season right now and the registrations are open. Now, the endeavor to create is, in true sense, to empower women.
Dr. Aditi Govitrikar is a psychologist, MBBS doctor, corporate coach, actor, and model. Recognized globally for her multifaceted career and championing mental wellness for all. Through her public talks and personal experience of transformation, she educates, inspires, and supports individuals to navigate emotional pain, develop resilience, and step into the next level of growth.
So, your journey has spanned medicine, modeling, acting, and now wellness. When you look back, what was the common thread holding all these different identities together?
I think somewhere it was discovering myself and then helping others rediscover themselves.
So, do you feel like one of these identities stands out the most?
I think it is all me. I don't think it's like choosing one of the five fingers, right? Which one do you choose? All of them are equally important, and all of them have a very special place in my heart. Few more roles that I'm looking forward to playing in future. So the journey doesn't end here. It's all an amalgamation of who I am and how I evolve.
Absolutely. I think you've evolved a great deal. So, being the first Indian woman to be Mrs. World in 2001, to, having the crown, and at this point in life where you've dedicated so much of your time to wellness and growth, I think that's been a really great journey. Can you tell us what it was like to wear the crown then and wear the crown now very differently?
Well, yes, of course. When I participated in Mrs. World, at that time when I decided to go to Las Vegas to represent India, a lot of questions were asked, like a lot of eyebrows were raised to say, hey, you're married. What's the point of doing a beauty pageant now? Nobody even knows in India. I mean, why are you putting yourself through this grinding, the whole process? So at that time, I have always loved challenges. I love exploring new things, discovering, because I feel that maximum growth happens at that time, in those times. So for me, it was the answer in my head always used to be, just because I'm married, why can I not be glamorous? Or just because I'm a mother of a 1-year-old, why can't I be the glamorous person I want to look like
Correct.
on stage? And why shouldn't a beauty pageant be there for married women? Because this pageant, Mrs. World, has been happening since 1984.
Correct.
In India, we weren't aware of it.
Yeah.
Because we were all about Miss India, Miss World, Miss Universe. Where is the Mrs. part of the woman, right? That was a question, and that was something that I wanted to prove to myself and to others that, hey, just because I'm married and just because I'm a mother, my journey doesn't end here. In fact, it could be a beginning of something new. And that's the attitude I went with to Mrs. World. When I came back, of course, everything changed and things are very different now. Now, when I look at my crown, it sits on my study table, of course.
Amazing.
And I look at it with pride. It is something that I'm extremely proud that I went ahead and took that step of helping women break stereotypes.
What was it like moving from the media world to the wellness and growth world? And why did you make that move?
Well, inherently, I've always been attracted to wellness. To give you an example, when I was in sixth standard, when I was on my summer vacation in Pune, I went and enrolled myself into yoga. I did it by myself because I was very intrigued with what breathing was all about. Because for me, it was like, we all breathe. what is it to learn? What is the science behind it?
Correct.
And that kind of nudged me into that. Also, when you look at medicine, medicine is also about healing. It is all about lack of illness and then that feeling of well-being.
Correct.
Right? So I have done that. I started Vipassana, which is a form of meditation technique, since 2008.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so I've been practicing these kind of things since a long time. And
That's the
then-
silence program, right?
It is a
Yeah.
silent retreat for 10 days,
Yeah.
yes, where there is no phones, there is no connection with the outside world, no reading,
Yeah.
no writing, all of those things. But it really helps you connect with yourself. So now when I made the transition, it was a transition on paper to say that now I'm a wellness expert because now I have the bandwidth to do so because I have got a degree, not a degree, I have got many degrees in psychology and therefore I can be called this on paper.
Amazing. I think that is so spectacular because what happens is people get, they get into a box and then they don't come out of that box. They
Yeah.
make that box their identity.
Yeah.
And to see that you touch so many different angles and you didn't stop yourself from getting identified as just an actress or just a doctor or just a wellness expert, and that whole array together makes who you are, and there's so many tangents and verticals to it. I think it's something that's truly inspiring to me.
Thank you.
And I think as we grow, like you said, each experience leads to growth.
Yes.
We don't grow just by studying
Sitting at
more
home.
or sitting at home or even like growing one business. The personal growth happens with different experiences in life.
Absolutely.
So tell me, women generally silently live in this pressure to have it all, right? Men are celebrated far more than women are. How do you see it?
I think this whole concept of having it all is flawed because nobody can have it all the time, yet we have everything. So, to give you an example, if today, if I'm working, obviously at that point, if my child needs me, I'm not available because I'm shooting. Yeah. Does that make me a bad mother? For the moment, perhaps. So, in that moment, I don't have it all. So it is very momentary, or it is a very, to me, I mean, yes, I am a mother. Overall, if you look at it, and I hope my children agree that I am a good mother. But in that moment, maybe not. Yeah. Or when I'm working and God forbid, if I fall sick, can I give my 100% to that shot? Maybe
No.
not. Does that make me a bad professional? So, my point is that it is great to have it all and we should work towards it because ultimately, if you look at it, we do have it all. It is about your thought process.
Yeah.
And here, I don't think I would like to make this gender difference to say that men have it all and women don't have it all. So I'll term it on a very gender fluid kind of a conversation to say that everybody has it all, but in that moment you might be falling short of certain things because there are so many balls in the air, and to juggle them all the time constantly can get a little troublesome at times.
Yeah, it's circumstantial, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, there are circumstances where there are moments in life or some months in the year where I feel like I'm a mother too, I'm working, things are going well in all aspects. And at that point, you really feel like you do have it all.
Yeah.
But then there are some months which are downwards. And then let's say work is not working out or
Yeah.
your child is not doing well in school
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
stressed and
yeah.
your own health is not
True.
up to mark. So yeah, you don't have it all. You're
Absolutely.
right. But I differ a little bit to what you said that you don't agree with the gender part. When it comes to men, having it all is slightly linear because when they have a happy family, which they don't like, let's say you have to maybe come home from a shoot if your child is sick. Maybe you have to attend to something and give up on something. But men don't usually have to do that. Men
Yeah,
are
well,
able
I
to.
agree with you. I agree with you on that level where, yes, do we treat men and women equally? Our expectations from the society, family, or even kids for that matter, are they same from a mother and father or man and woman at workplace? No.
No.
A woman is expected to do a lot more, smiling and proudly say that I'm a multitasker, to which I agree with you.
Yeah.
However, one thing is there that men and women are different. We are built differently,
we are.
physically and emotionally. So we should speak about gender equality for sure, where your intellectual opportunities are concerned, where your pay is concerned, because the amount of work that a woman and a man does at a workplace is the same. At home, there should be a fair share of looking after the child. Hey, you know what? We women have given birth to this child. We've gone through the labor pains. We've carried the child for 9 months. It's only fair that a man takes a little more responsibility, especially in the first year of the child. But these are conversations which will take, I think, a little time for become a practicality in society. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing that should stop us from having these conversations and make sure that everybody understands that when we talk about equality, it is not that we are saying that if you can lift 15 kilos in a gym, I can
I
too.
can do, yeah.
We are not talking about physical equality. We are talking about mental and intellectual opportunities and that kind of equality.
Exactly. That was exactly my point. And I feel like I hope that our generation has more of these conversations so the generation ahead can actually see and live that kind of equality
Absolutely.
where, you know, in I think our parental generation, it was just the mother's job to look
Yeah.
after the child. The father was not even considered. Him going to work was enough to say he's doing enough for the family.
Yeah.
Our generations change a little bit where he's a little more involved, but I think that equality part, and I hope it happens in the next, so to say that yes, it is really everybody's job to be participating at home, at work, professionally, in every aspect.
Yes.
So tell me, glamour often hides loneliness, because you know how they say it's lonely at the top. You've seen all of it. Can you explain what was that like for you?
See, loneliness, it's not really directly connected to glamour. Loneliness can strike anybody at any time. And you know what? Today we are not talking about this, but loneliness, depression, anxiety are at a all-time high. We are not talking about it, unfortunately. And that is solely because of the time that we spend on screen. And I feel very strongly about it because we human beings need that connect. Yeah. If you go out to a restaurant, you'll see that little kids, like 1-year-olds and all, are given an iPad
yeah.
and they are swiping, and the parent is very proudly telling her friend or his friend, whatever, that my child can swipe. And I'm like, that's not something you should be proud of, not because of anything else, because you are numbing the brain. We've taken a long time for our brain to reach here in the evolutionary cycle. So that connect is very, very crucial, and we are losing that very quickly. Our attention span has gone down.
Correct.
We all are getting very addicted. To give you an example, and I'm not talking about, oh, I am oh so great that, you know, I
I
can
don't
say
use it.
this.
Yeah.
When I go for Vipassana, I kid you not, for the first 3 days, I feel, you know, that feeling that, oh, I have forgotten something and I'll come. And what is that? That is the phone in my hand. And that took me by like, when I realized it, I'm like, oh my God, that instrument has become part of my body.
Yeah.
It's like my anatomy. And I'm like, no, I cannot do this to myself because it has repercussions. Again, that's a very long and serious conversation. Having said that, anybody can be lonely. The difference here, which I would like to point out, and because I went through it, is the difference between being alone and being lonely. Two very different things.
Absolutely.
So you can be with somebody yet
And be
feel
lonely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is something that people don't realize. They're like, oh, you know, you're single. Do you feel lonely all the time? And I'm like, I'm single. I'm alone, but I'm not lonely because I have so much that's going on. And yet at times, yes, loneliness does strike you, and then you're like, okay, how do I get out of it, right?
No, I meant to ask, that is absolutely true. One can be lonely in a marriage. One can be lonely in living in a huge joint family.
Yeah.
One can be lonely living with 5 close friends from college.
Yeah.
You can be lonely. It's a state of mind.
Yes.
But my point of asking was, when you were in the spotlight, did you face any mental health challenges that you can guide young girls today that they may be facing and may be ashamed of talking about? Because today the world is different. Back then, no one spoke about it. You were supposed to keep quiet, keep it
Yeah.
inside, suppress it.
Yeah.
But now that you are at this platform to help other people,
Yeah.
do you think people should see it like that?
Seeking help is something that I definitely say, yes, go for it. Do not shy away from it. It is not necessary for you to be strong all the time. If you feel the need and you feel that, okay, I'm feeling lonely, reach out. There are many avenues now, whether it is online.
Correct.
There are psychologists who do online sessions,
Yeah.
and why not? Do that. There's no harm. There is no that, oh my, okay, I have to handle everything on my own kind of a thing. So please feel free to take that little baby step towards getting rid of your loneliness, because it can definitely be taken care of. And one thing which you said, which I didn't address, was lonely at the top. This is a fact. This happens. And not only in glamour field, but I work with a lot of corporate leaders, etc. What happens is when you reach a certain level, when you're the leader of the pack, you're not expected to be vulnerable. You're not expected to show your weakness or to show that I need to brainstorm this. I want to understand how do I go ahead with this decision. So yes, that is true. But then fortunately, there are now, YPOs, YEOs, etc., where people have formed these groups where then you can reach out to your peer and have a conversation
Correct.
there.
Connect on the same mental level and
Yes.
on the same socioeconomic levels, because
Yeah.
then, like you said, lonely at the top also happens because everybody else puts you on a pedestal,
Yeah.
and you find it so hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
You find it so hard to show your weaker side
Yeah.
and your human side.
Correct.
And it's almost like, you're a star and you have to behave like a star in whichever field, not just
Yeah.
glamour, in any field, even in the corporate world.
Yes.
Then you're a star and you can't be a boss and be like, oh, today I'm having a lazy day, or today my brain's not, I have brain fog.
Yeah.
You can't have those days.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're not expected to.
You're not expected
Okay?
to.
You're not,
Yeah, I know. But then
unfortunately.
people forget
Yeah.
the human side of
Correct,
things.
correct.
So tell me, you've spoken about reinvention for yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't consciously sit down and say, okay, now I need to look at my life and I need to reinvent. I pretty much am the kind of person who goes with the flow. So to leave my medicine for a field which was completely new to me, not only to me, but nobody from my family had any experience in this field, so that I could turn to them for guidance, I jumped blindly into it. Uh, be it going back to studying and doing my psychology from Harvard, again, it was something that I just said, okay, let me do it, why not? So I don't, uh, unfortunately, I'm not a chess player. And I say this because there's a big regret there that I wish I had learned chess, because that kind of helps you in life as well. So I'm the kind of person who decides, okay, let me do this. But the thing is, I don't then leave it. I'm not the kind of person who will say, I'll leave it halfway and do it. Then I will make a success out of it. I will make sure that I do my best, give it all that is required, and I finish it. So in that process, I think reinvention happened. It was a byproduct, not the goal.
What was the goal?
Goal was to learn new things, to face challenges, because I'm an introvert by nature. So to go on stage and like, I remember there used to be days when if I had to go to a mall, I had to mentally prepare myself. I used to get so nervous entering that big space, and like that. Therefore, I would never be late for any of my lectures, because we had 200 students in medicine, and if I was late, then I knew that everybody would look at me. So I would never ever be late. I would always be before time and waiting. From that, to be able to speak in front of cameras, or today I can stand in front of a stadium and address, no problem. That is something that pushed me.
Wow. That's so beautiful. I would have never imagined that, looking at you and speaking
Yeah.
with you and the energy you have today, I would have never imagined that you were somebody who had stage fright
Oh
or
my
people
God.
fright.
Oh my
Hard to imagine. So tell me, what is the hardest identity that you had to let go of in order to grow?
Nothing actually. I'm the kind of person who's very fluid. I'm very open to suggestions. I don't get stuck with identities, or I don't have that ego thing that, like you asked me, right? Should I address you as Aditi or Dr. Aditi? And I'm like, it's your comfort level. So I'm not stuck on, oh, okay, I am a doctor, so I should be addressed as one. So that never even occurs to me.
That is a very profound and aware state of mind, because what happens with people is they get stuck with identities. I'm a doctor, I'm an actor, I'm the
Yeah.
leader, I
Yeah.
have to be addressed and looked at a certain way, I have to be treated a certain way.
Hmm.
And for you to not have that, not only shows that your life is not based on ego also shows that you are that aware, self-aware, to reach a place where you have not stuck yourself with any particular identity.
Yeah.
And I think that's very rare. I've had a lot of people come in, no, really, and I've spoken with a lot of people, but somewhere I see they are, they still identify themselves as that one particular, being a doctor, being a, I don't know, actor.
Because we need it to survive. I guess that is required. So, but the very interesting thought that came to my mind the other day when I was speaking to somebody who had a family member who was suffering from a dementia. So, at the end of the day, we all are a sum total of our memory, right? If memory is taken away from us, who am I? Where is the identity then? So that was like, it came as, oh my God, yeah, who am I?
A
So,
collection of
yeah,
experiences.
a collection of memories, right?
Yeah.
A collection of living in the moment, but basis who I think I am and what my experiences are.
Also, I was just having this conversation with Abhishek before you came, and we were talking about how significant we think we are, but actually how insignificant we are. People make it all about me. I think like this, and I think this should work like this,
Yeah.
and I am sure that this is how the world works.
Yeah.
But in the end, like, you're a part of a huge system,
Yeah.
whether it be a universal system, a man-made system, but you're a part of a huge system,
Yeah.
and you're just a speck. And you remove
Not
that
even.
speck. I'm saying,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
know.
even, you're right.
I know,
And
yeah.
you remove yourself,
Yeah.
nothing changes.
Yeah.
The system moves on within seconds. So I just think that, whole identity thing is very self-consoling.
Yes.
It's more of like self-soothing.
It's required to sustain.
Yeah, it is
It's
just
required to,
because
yeah.
it's for you to move to
Correct.
the next level.
Absolutely.
So tell me, having such a great medical background, how did you merge that with alternative wellness practices today?
Well, I wouldn't say it's alternative medical practices that I practice because, again, psychology is the science that has come into being after studying human mind. And when I embarked on that journey, it was pretty much the thought that was there was whether to do skin or whether to do psychology. And mind is something that truly intrigued me. And the trigger, the big trigger was when I was in Bigg Boss. Firstly, I don't know what I was doing in Bigg Boss. Again, because it was a challenge, I said, chalo, main karti hu. And I thought I will be thrown out, frankly, in the first vote out, right? But I stuck around and I was there till the semi-finals, which till date, I question myself, how did I manage? But in that house, it was so surprising to see people behave the way they did, because some of them I knew from outside
Correct.
of Bigg Boss's house, and some, of course, I'd never met, so I got to know them there. And then the journey in those 77 days, from day 1 to the 77th day, I saw the graph of people and what they were doing and how they were behaving. I was like, how will I ever know who is what and what are they thinking? Until date, I can promise you, the more you know, the less you know. It has become like that. But it's so interesting, human mind, and how one reacts to the same situation, how there are different reactions from different people. And my endeavor was that I don't want to be reactive. I want to be the person who responds. And that's what kind of Vipassana helped me. And I'm still getting there. It's a long way there. But yeah, that's the beautiful journey, or that's the beautiful part that kind of pushed me into learning psychology.
That's really one of the mantras I have for life. Don't react, respond. It's easy to say, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
of course.
very difficult to follow, and especially in difficult situations where your natural way of being comes out. Let's say anger,
Yeah.
and then if you remind yourself, it's not a reaction, it's a
Yes.
response.
Yeah.
And to what you said also makes me think, or was made me realize, is we react differently when we're in a confined space. We react differently when we're in a comfort space. We react differently when we're in a foreign place. So I think our environment really changes. Like you said, the human mind is fascinating.
Yes.
And I've had a few close friends. My sister practices quite a lot. She goes to the center. I've always had one fascinating question to ask. When you go in with, let's say, 1,000,000 thoughts because you're in your daily rut. You're there in a 10-day silence program. When coming out of it, what do you think is silenced the most?
So, how I have experienced Vipassana after doing about 10 of them is that when you go in, whatever bothers you the most, and it could be from your immediate past, it could be something as recent as just before going in, something, that's bothering, that loses its hold on your mind. It's not that you can erase your past, or it's not like that you can erase the event, but it's just that that whole, that you are constantly in that
Yeah.
negative loop,
Yeah.
that breaks. So that itself gives you a lot of feeling of being light. But as you go into meditation and as you kind of delve into yourself, a lot of rubbish comes out, and then that's kind of you get rid of. And then slowly you kind of are at peace, and there's quiet and there's bliss. Till something then will come up, because we are, again, there's just so much that happens in our lives, and there's negatives, positives, and thoughts about future, that it is not like you can experience the thoughtlessness of it. That's a very, very advanced stage.
Of being, yeah.
And when people say that, I don't want to think, that, like I said, it takes it's like almost Buddha state. So thoughts do come, and it's a continuous flow, but it's not like you get stuck in it. So you observe drashta bhav, or you can observe it with equanimity, which is a beautiful state to be in. So it doesn't affect or impact you as much as it does when you're out there,
Yeah, it's like being a character in a movie or watching the movie.
kind of.
So you're saying actually watch the movie,
Kind of.
pass by. Yeah, I think that's amazing. And yeah, like you said, it would take a lot to get there.
Yeah.
Because your mind generally controls you. It's very hard to control the mind, and it takes a lot to get to that spot.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that you have.
No, I have not. I'm work in progress.
No, but it's great to, it's even commendable that you call yourself work in progress. Because what happens, I have met people who have not even reached, and they say, they have achieved it. But true achievement of that peace of mind is really knowing that everything is happening not to you, it's just happening.
Yes.
And I think that's when people get confused, because everybody believes everything is happening to you.
Yeah.
It's just,
So see, ultimately, when people say, "Oh, you're so simple," but that's the thing, right? Ultimately, if you think of life, or if you think of yourself, simplicity is pretty much complexity resolved. This is a beautiful, I forget who said this, but I live by that. Like, if there is some complex thoughts that come to my mind, and I'm a born worrier, I have to confess, I can worry about anything. I used to worry about anything and everything, right? So like being late, for example, that would give me hives. I would be like, oh my God, I'm late, I'm keeping people. So simple things like that. Whereas there are some people who are always late, and they're just like, what's the big deal? Why are you getting so
it
stressed?
doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
Even I get anxiety if I'm late.
So things like these, right? So to come from that to be in the sense, or to be zen, or to be blissful, or to be joyous, that takes time, and that is complexity resolved. So I love this statement.
That's beautiful. So can you tell me, in your counseling work, what is the one recurring emotional pattern you see people battling with?
Somebody else should change, then everything will change. So for example, there is a girl who comes to me and says that, my parents are putting pressure on me. If they change, I will be able to achieve whatever it is that I want to achieve. Or husband and wife, my husband should do this, then our marriage will be better. Or the husband saying the same thing. Or my boss should change, then things will be better. So it is always that the other person has to change. I am perfect the way I am, and I'm not getting to where I want to be, or whatever is expected out of me, because of this person.
The hindrance is the other
So,
person.
yes, always. So that is a very common, typical underlying emotion, or the thought that I have come across.
So that people are always in the victim mode.
Victim or not, but yeah.
No, in the sense, not victim in the harsh sense of the word, but it's like, I'm not able to get there because my husband is behaving a certain
if that
way.
other person changes, everything.
Yeah, so then it's like, I'm the bichara, right? The bichara word is the victim word I'm trying to use. Like, I'm okay, I'm trying my best, but only if my parents change, I'll be able to function better, or my husband, or my friends, whoever. Yeah, I see that a lot as well. Do you feel there's a practice they can do to free themselves from this?
So the only practice that one can follow is look within. So, there is no guru, or there is no podcast, or there is no third person who can get you out of that thought process.
True.
Unless and until you don't get in touch with yourself and you see the ultimate truth, is when you'll be able to tackle with this. That's the only way. The only way is to go within.
And I think a lot of people who come to counseling, a lot of people, at least it's the first step to understanding that there is a problem. I think after that, like you very correctly said, identifying that whatever situation you want to change actually lies with you.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people, I feel that as well. Most people who speak with me, they're like, if this changes, my life will change.
Yeah.
If I move out of this and I do this, my life will change. If I
Yeah.
had done this, my life would have changed.
Yeah.
But it's like you can still change that.
Yeah.
They're stuck in that. And I think that's just such a common way of thinking across the board, across all age stages also. Anyway, moving on, tell me from beauty to well-being, how do you define wellness beyond the body and the beauty standards?
So typically focus always when you say beauty or when you say wellness, it is pretty much always about your physical
Correct.
looks, your physical body, and that's where it all ends. Now, it's not like it's stuck there now. Fortunately, things have moved in a better direction to say that what about within? What about your thought process? What about your mental state? Because at the end of the day, that's what I say to people, that if you're not confident or if you're not feeling good about yourself, no matter even if you get the best designer to dress you up, the best makeup, it is going to show in your aura or it is going to show in your person. Like, for example, if I enter the room looking all dolled up and, well dressed and everything, but if my energy is low, if my shoulders are hunched and if I'm looking down, and if I say, yeah, let's do it, you are going to sense that. Even if I don't open my mouth to tell you that, hey, I'm not feeling all right. Hey, I'm not feeling well. You are going to sense that, right? So ultimately, it is about that. It is about a combination of both. And I don't take away the physical part of it at all, because this, like we wear clothes, the body is something that we wear. It is important to look after it. It is important to wear the SPF 50 and, wear beautiful makeup. So that also is part of it. But do not neglect your internal health or emotional state of being or your psychology, for example. It has to be both.
It's so true, because I was giving an example to somebody the other day. I said, brides, no matter how they dress up, why do they always look so radiant? Why do they always look the best? They have that glow.
Yes.
Because it's that level of happiness, that level of excitement. It has very little to do with clothes and makeup, because not everyone's spending that kind of money or wearing that kind of designer or doing that kind of makeup or whatever.
Yeah.
But yet every bride's picture you see, video you see, you're like, oh, you get that feeling. So tell me, from doctor to actress to counselor, what identity shifts taught you the most about self-worth?
I think being a mother, I would say that really questioned my being a lot. It tested my patience. It gave me incredible amount of joy. So that is something that I would say, yeah, that's the one.
That's the one that gave you maximum self-worth.
Yes.
Because I think we land up basing our self-worth on, most people land up basing their self-worth on their jobs, occupations, religion.
Yeah.
I'm worth so much, I go to the mandir 20 times. I'm such a good person that I'm running this company. Or I look at my worth because identifying with work.
Yeah.
But I think it's the love then.
Perhaps, yeah, it's the bond. It is the
love.
yes.
I think when that unconditional love comes in, I totally agree with you. After I had my son, that love you experience,
that's,
being a mother, that doesn't come from anything else in life. And that bliss, that joy. And it's great that you have actually defined self-worth from that, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the loss there. Tell us how people navigate limelight, vulnerability, and authenticity. Because being in the limelight, I think everyone has a public face, and then everyone obviously has a private face, right? So how did you deal with that?
So what I believe is that everybody wears masks all the time. It is not that you can be 100% authentic even to yourself all the time. It's not possible. You as a mother to your son will appear very different than how you appear to me or to Abhishek, right? You're wearing different masks all the time. So how about just accepting it? It's fine. Secondly, where vulnerability is concerned, I hope that Brené Brown's that TED Talk everybody has watched, because it's just fabulous what vulnerability can do to you as a person when you share it. Yeah, that's a very profound TED talk. One of the profound TED talks that I have enjoyed watching. So vulnerability now, I think people have become aware that it is important. It is not necessary for you to be this strong person or strong human being all the time. You can talk about your weaknesses. You can, but again, you can't talk about it all the time to everybody. So it's a bit tricky here, and that's how you navigate life. It is a bit tricky.
But you know what you said was very interesting, that let's say how I appear to my son, how I appear to myself, how I appear to you, or let's say how I appear to a friend of mine, very different. So you said these are different masks I'm wearing. What if I'm not wearing any mask, and what if everyone's perspective makes me different? What if it's not really me, and it's just your perspective towards me, my son's perspective towards me, my husband's or my friends? Because the perspectives are so different and they're experiencing different versions of me. What if I'm not the one wearing a mask?
So that's a very interesting thought. Now, if Janmashtami has just gone by, when Krishna opened his mouth, there was universe in him, right? Ultimately, it is you. If you don't exist, where is everybody?
Right.
Correct. Now, when you say that it is his perception about you, but that is what you are observing. So it is your perception actually.
Oh, how interesting. It's like a catch-22.
It's not catch 22. It's very clear.
No, I'm trying to put it a little differently. I'll tell you. So let's say you have walked in and you met me for the first time and you think, oh, this girl is very shy, for example, or she's very bold. But that is your perception of me. That's not necessarily me wearing a mask of boldness or
But
shyness.
that's your aura that speaks to me.
Right. So you still think it lies within me.
If you were with eyes down and if you were talking to me like this, that would be my perception. Because that's the aura you are creating. But if you're looking at me, making eye contact, I would say, yeah, she's fairly confident. That's what you are showing to me. Then it is a mask. It might be you. And mask doesn't mean it's all fake.
No, of course. I
There's
mean
some
different versions.
aspect.
Yeah, aspects or
Some
versions of you.
aspect of
Yeah.
you, right? So that is what it is. So your energy speaks. It is at times even when you don't want to.
Correct.
So that's where body language comes into the picture. That's where when they say that, your communication is only partly words. The rest of it is
Body language,
your body
energies.
language, your emotion, your micro emotions and all that.
Wow, that's so amazing. I've never actually had that, say that. Because I always think it's the perception.
It is.
It is the different people's different perception towards you based on experiences with you.
Also what you are creating. So
Correct.
to an extent, if you think about it, it is also the space between you two. Like today, I came here, I came with a certain thought process. Had I come here, if God forbid, if my car had met with an accident, I would have been very flustered. I would have come with a very different energy. Then anything and everything would have irritated me.
Triggered you, yeah.
And that you would have sensed. So therefore, the thought
The perception towards you would have been
would have
completely
been
different.
right?
Correct.
And my perception towards you, if you were not patient enough with me in that situation, I would like, God, she doesn't understand at all.
Yeah.
Is she not human? You know what I'm saying? So it shifts.
That's what I was trying to say, that even circumstances and experiences
Of course,
shift
of course.
all the different facets of a person.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a huge learning if we can have, that when we judge people, we tend to forget the experience they're coming from. So how I've experienced you today is from, let's say, a blissful journey you had towards coming here. But like you said, if you had a tough journey coming here, I would have experienced you very differently.
Yes.
But then my judgment is based on just without thinking what you may have come from. And I think if we change that, our perspective towards people generally will change. And I think there'll be more kindness.
Yes.
Because we'll just become kinder in how we perceive people. Because
Yeah.
we don't know what journey
absolutely.
anybody is coming from. And I think that can really add depth to how we receive people.
Yes.
So tell us, what does it take to step away from success and chase alignment?
Actually, where success also is concerned, it has always been the byproduct. I have never chased success. I'm very ambitious, which means that I want to win, but it is nothing to do with she should not win and I should win. It is never about the other person. It is always about, if I'm giving the exam, I want to get A plus or I want to score the maximum that I can. I'm not
concerned about.
concerned. So therefore, success also to me was, if I'm going to be a model, yes, I was not the tallest model on ramp. In fact, I was one of the short ones, because 5'7" on ramp is not considered to
Tall,
be a good
yeah.
thing. Yet I was like, okay, this is me. I'm very shy. I'm very nervous about this whole thing. How can I be the best? How can I be my country's top supermodel where I will be in demand? What should I do for that? So it basically started off over there in that sense. If I was doing psychology, I was like, which is the best university that I can get my degree from? After having gotten a master's from India and doing a post graduation from Tata Institute, I said, okay, India ka ho gaya, now in the world, how can I get there? That has been my thought process, and that to me is success. So today, when I do Vipassana, it is not about comparing myself with my sister, because I mean, we pretty much do it simultaneously. That okay, she's done 11, I'm stuck at 10. It is not like that. For me, it is, I have done 10. Now, when can I go to 20? Because my ultimate goal is to sit in silence for 60 days, which is a mammoth task. It is not something that is just going to happen overnight.
60 days.
Yeah, that's the maximum that they offer. Right?
You have actually done 60
No,
days?
no, I haven't.
Oh, you're yet
my
to.
goal is to.
Oh.
So I'm still at 10. 20 days also seems a lot, right? Because again, there are, and that's an excuse, I know, I'm saying it aloud. When I'm saying it, I realize it, is that there are other responsibilities. I'm running a business, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. How can I take away 20 days away from
Take off
everything?
from that.
Right? So that's a conversation pretty much that is happening. So success is not like I've left success. It is not like I
You
have
moved away
given up
from it.
everything and I'm going to, okay, I am wearing saffron, but yeah, what I'm saying is that I still want to be successful. I still want to enjoy everything that I have. There are so many milestones that I have set myself to achieve in life, and that's what, so, but while succeeding, alignment is important. So to stay on track, to stay equanimous, irrespective of what life throws at me, that is a challenge. That is something that that is something that I want to be successful at.
What does fulfillment mean to you?
Bliss, peace of mind. That's
Do you
the-
think fulfillment comes from others or from ourselves?
Always, I've always said this. I mean, it is all within. It is all from yourself.
When did you realize that?
I think after, it took a long time, because again, to blame somebody else for the situation or the state of mind I am in is easy. To take responsibility of the situation is like, but it wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong, or it's easier like that. So I think maybe 5th or 6th time that I finished my Vipassana is when that realization happened that I need to look at this very, very, very differently.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because I think I wouldn't say I've reached there, but I have sort of reached the mindset where only you complete you. And only you can make yourself happy, or you can make yourself miserable. Yes, there'll always be things
External.
thrown at you, things happening, like sun is shining, wind is coming, rain is happening, but it's up to you what you feel about it.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I think it's very important. I love to hear how people define fulfillment for themselves, because it really helps you think, right, how you see it and how other people see it. So tell me, how did you begin again when you had already been on top?
I think when I was on top, the sense that okay, I am it never came to my mind. To give you an example, I remember that after I won Gladrax Supermodel, that was my entry into modeling and glamour field in that sense. After winning Gladrax Supermodel contest, the next day my hoardings were all over in Mumbai. And when I saw it, I'm like, that looks familiar. Even it didn't even strike me that that's me. So, and I was in that kind of phase. I went to a party, I was invited to a party, and then somebody said, oh, you have come, that means this party must be happening. And I'm like, I'm not that important, that kind of thought process came to my mind.
Humble.
So not humble, I think I was dumb. I don't think I realized how popular I had become, because I was still going back to medicine, right? I was
Naive.
still, yeah.
Naive is the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would still call it stupid.
No, you'll say you were naive.
So, So that top came and went, and I didn't realize it. I didn't, not that I didn't enjoy it, not that I didn't travel or enjoyed the best times in that sense, but that whole thing that, okay, I am the cat's whiskers, that thought was never there.
So tell me also about how you tackle challenges being a mother, because being a mother changes life, right?
Yes.
Our profession is put on the side for a bit, especially working mothers.
Yeah.
Your own identity gets on hold for a little bit because you're trying to identify as a new person. How did you deal with that?
So I had very difficult pregnancies. Both my children decided, they were very impatient, they decided to be preterm, premature.
Oh.
To an extent where my son was in the NICU for a month. And we were not sure whether he would survive or not, because he was just about 6.5 months when he was born.
That's very early.
Very, very early. So his lungs weren't developed. His eyebrows, he had no eyebrows. He looked like an alien. I mean, at that time, of course, I thought this was the most beautiful thing that I have seen in my life. But when I see the pictures now, I'm like, oh my God, this was a thing. So, so at that time, this whole conversation in my head was, how do I make this little thing survive?
Yeah.
That was, I was in a full survival mode for the child and then make them thrive. So at that time, there's no identity left where I was concerned. I was only dedicated, devoted to making sure that this child lives.
No, that's what I'm saying. That when people have babies, women, we tend to lose a part of ourselves, right? Or lose a part of identities, whether it could be difficult childbirth, whether it could be postpartum depression. As a counselor, as a therapist, how do you think people should pace themselves, the switch between yourself and being a mother?
So I think instead of, so changing the narrative would help to add to what you're saying, is that instead of thinking of it as that I'm losing my identity, it is about gaining one more identity. It is adding to who you are.
Yeah, it's another badge.
Isn't it beautiful that you have the capacity of actually manufacturing a human being inside of you? I mean, look at how beautiful life is, that you can create life in you.
Yeah.
That is adding to you. It is not taking away from your identity. It is about, on a superficial level, yes, at that time you lose time and you lose things that you want to do to the child because
Correct.
you're devoted or dedicated to bringing up that child. But that also ultimately adds to you. So if you change your narrative to say that, I have created this beautiful thing, and how about making this beautiful thing thrive in his or her life, that will definitely then take away that angst that, oh my God, I was supposed to reach here in my
Yeah.
career, but this is a step back. It's a kind of a trade-off.
So, people start their wellness journey, mental health journey, Vipassana journey much later in their life. And I would say broadly, not to any specific country or caste or community, but largely in the world, I see a lot of people think I'll do it when I'm older. Right now is the time to work and thrive and, see what the world has to offer and experience everything. Great. But do you wish you had started this journey much earlier, or do you advise to people if they start this journey much earlier, their life would be way more beautiful?
I feel and I think and I believe that meditation or going within, introspection, should be taught to young children. It is not something that you do when you're older.
Yeah.
When you're older, you devote more time to it. But if you learn meditation or going within early on, then your work becomes so much easier. You thrive. So you fast track your life
Yeah.
towards your goals, towards success, or whatever it is that you are looking at for yourself. So I think it's important that all the principals or whoever are the policy makers, that they introduce meditation in school.
Absolutely. I think how they navigate through life will change, and it will become a lot more easier because their mind will be able to understand why they're feeling a certain way.
True.
I had this conversation with one of the education specialists who I had on my podcast much earlier on, where why isn't it introduced right from the beginning? Like, have a 15-minute, section.
Yeah.
Say what is emotions. Explain what are emotions, right? Because there are 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds who tend to go in with a bullying attitude.
Yeah.
Then the 8 to 9-year-olds who are very scared and timid and they go into school. But if everyone's taught, then by the time they're 18 or 20, we'll just function better as a community.
Even at that age, they'll function better.
That's what I'm saying. They'll function even at 18, 20
Yes,
much
yes,
healthier than
yes.
we did or our
Yeah.
generation did because we
Yeah.
learned much later.
Yes.
And people still have that mindset, oh, I'm older, I'll get into
Yeah.
it. No, I don't have time. Who has a time for meditation? But if you start early, it changes.
You actually land up creating more time for yourself.
Correct.
That is something that people don't realize. So when I went for Vipassana, or when I go for Vipassana, it's taking away 10 days, right? Away from everything material or everything in this thing. But I know that when I go there and then when I come out, I'm so much more productive as a person. I'm able to discern about things and be assertive and just that there is some clarity that comes in, and then you spend less time being confused. So
Yeah,
you
I
create
think-
more time.
Declutter.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it is declutter.
that's the right word.
Yeah, I feel the same. Even if it's 15 minutes in the morning, I feel like it helps you declutter
Yeah.
and also makes you realize what is not important.
Yeah.
Because we end up giving importance to things that are not important in our lives and the things that ultimately won't matter. We end up making it so
Yes.
important and big in our head because if you're living in the rut, it becomes important. So tell us, I want to question the psychology part of it. How do our emotions manifest in the body and how can we truly heal?
Very, very good question. Emotions which are suppressed will manifest as physical ailments, if not today, tomorrow. So be very mindful of that. What do I mean by that? If you think about your body, if you sit still for 5 minutes and just scan your body, you will realize that there is some pain somewhere, there is some heaviness somewhere. Or the other example that I can give you is, a lot of people come and say that I get a headache in the evenings, and they normalize it, or that my lower back hurts
All the time.
whenever I'm doing this thing. And what is it? It's not like that. It's not like there is some physical problem there. It is the stress that you carry in your body. So every human being has a certain body part that you carry stress in. Some people carry it in their lower belly. Lower back is very common. Shoulders is very common. Headaches are very, very common. So don't normalize any of these pains. Go to the root cause of it. There might be a medical problem. You might have a number, like glasses or whatever. That might be giving you a headache, but go to the root cause of it. If there's nothing, then it's obviously that there is stress or some anxiety or some negative emotion which you're storing in your body, which is manifesting as physical ailment. Now, this is a very light example in that sense, but there is research going on which is questioning the origin of cancer or questioning origin of Alzheimer's or dementia and things like that. So are emotions connected to it? I don't know, but there is research going on right now. But yes, suppressed emotions, especially negative ones, will always cause some problem for you. Therefore, expressing in the right manner, which means that I'm not giving you a hall pass to say, I get angry, I want to express, I will chuck something at you, I'll throw things. No, it is a right way. So if I am angry with my child, and anger is an important emotion. Negative emotions have their place in our lives. You cannot be thinking positive all the time or feeling positive all the time.
Correct.
Those are important. So you have to express it in the right manner. I do shout at my children. I do get angry with them if they don't do what is required of them.
Correct.
It is important. But if you check my pulse, it will not rise. So that is an anger which I'm showing, but it is not at the cost of my physical health.
You're not internalizing that anger.
Yes, yes. So expression of negative emotions. If I lose somebody dear to me, of course I'm going to grieve. Of course I'm going to feel sad. Of course I'm going to cry. But for how long? And if after a certain period of time you continue to feel so, please reach out for help.
Help.
It's
Correct.
very important. So emotions it is us, right? We are all human beings. And that's the funny thing when people say that, oh, but you're a doctor, you're a psychologist, how can you fall ill? Or how can you feel sad? I'm not a robot, or
Correct. Not
psychologists
built
are not.
differently.
No, yeah, if you pinch me, I'm going to cry out
Same,
in
yeah.
pain. So it is important to understand that emotions are precious and treat them like that, and be aware that it's okay to have negative emotions. It's part of us being human. Just make sure that it doesn't damage you.
Correct. Absolutely. Tell me, finding fulfillment after external validations like the crowns, fame, and success. Have you learned the trick of that?
I think external validation is very important. And I love getting validated. It is part of being a human being. Today, why are award ceremonies, why are they planned? If somebody was to just drop a crown from the sky and say that you're Mrs. World, what am I going to do with that?
Correct.
Unless you don't acknowledge me that, oh, I am India's first Mrs. World, which is external validation, that's part of us human beings. We need external validation. That's fine. Now, again, it is all about balance. Constantly, if I seek validation from external sources, that is harmful to me, because then my identity is dependent on how you treat me or how somebody else says something about me.
Correct.
So there has to be a balance over here to say that there are certain things which, yes, it's good to be validated, or there might be negative validation. Not it. The word won't be validation; it'll be something else. But like trolling, it's part of it, right?
Correct.
I am getting happy that somebody is calling me India's first Mrs. World. If somebody says something negative,
Then
it
I'm
will-
really, yeah.
it will
upset.
make me, it will upset me.
Yeah.
But then, do I have the self-awareness to say that this is external and this is also external?
Yeah, I think what you said is very right. Also, what makes me think about what you're saying is when we do need that external validation to push us to do worldly things. So, if I have to be a successful podcaster, if I have to be a successful businesswoman, I would need certain amount of validation to push myself to get there.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, like you said, if the crown wasn't there, then what am I working for?
Yeah.
You're right, absolutely right. I think that's a very different way of saying, because people nowadays keep promoting don't seek validation. But you're right, you can't not seek it at all.
No, it is part of us. Don't
Yeah.
go seeking that was the podcast good? Was the podcast good? That is not the way it should be done. But yes, I mean, don't go out looking for it like from every single person that surrounds you. But if you want to share it with your partner or your child to say that, hey, look at this interview, what do you think about it?
Yeah.
And then take the validation from them, positive or negative, whichever way, that is fine.
Yeah, I think that is a part of life,
Yes.
like you said.
Yeah.
So let's move on to a very important topic, Marvelous Mrs. India. Tell us about what it is first.
So basically, I created Marvelous Mrs. India. We are on our third season right now, and the registrations are open. The reason why I created this after so long, because I won in 2001, and I created Marvelous Mrs. India in 2023. Why after so long? We'll come to that. But the whole reason or the endeavor to create is, in true sense, to empower women. Now, I know this word is being used lightly most of the times, but what am I doing in Marvelous Mrs. India is, it is an amalgamation of who I am, which is a medical doctor, a psychologist, plus Mrs. World, and having trained Miss Indias, Mrs. Indias, Mrs. Worlds, etc. Plus, I've done some corporate coaching also. So I have finished my ICF training. I've combined all that to help. So I do sessions with each and every participant of mine.
Wow.
One to one. Yes, myself. One to one. Because I feel that if I change one life, that life will change the family. And ultimately, we are a sum total of family members in the society. So this is my little baby step towards making that change. And I have also observed that at certain age or stage in life, a woman loses herself completely, goes into that rut of, that hamster wheel. So to bring her out of that and say, look at you, who are you? Look at yourself in the mirror and say that you're worth it. That bringing her back on track to that beautiful young girl who was full of life and full of dreams and wanting to reach somewhere, you lose that in this rut of life. So to bring her back on track with beauty. So it's my hashtag is beauty inside out. So we don't overlook the fact that you have to walk a certain way. You have to do the Q&A, which is part of pageantry,
Correct.
or wear beautiful gowns. So that is also part of it. But that inner beauty, the focus on that, that is the main goal. Yeah. So that is what Marvelous Mrs. India is all about.
So, what made you start this? What made you get into it and say, you know what, now I'm going to make a difference 20 years later, get into the pageantry world, but combine mental health with it?
So the reason I started was because I used to be invited as a judge for many beauty pageants, and trust me, that was really a relatively simple job than organizing a beauty
Correct.
pageant by myself. Why did I choose the hard way? Is because in most of the beauty pageants I saw that the woman was not getting trained the way she should. She was not gaining anything out of it. It was just like it had become like a business for the organizers. Nothing wrong with that, but just that give back also. It needs to be win-win. So I wanted to create this win-win kind of a situation. That was one thing. The second thing which I saw was crowns was for sale. So I'm like, okay,
Favor.
that's something that is not nice. So these were the reasons I started it. And of course, the main reason was that I felt that I was ready to actually sit with each and every woman who's a participant of mine and help her navigate through her life.
How beautiful. Tell me, how do you see this academy reshaping the idea of beauty, confidence, and identity for Indian women today?
I think 100%, I'm hoping that this becomes a legacy for me to leave behind. And Marvelous Mrs. India really touches as many lives as is physically possible by me and my team. And that is my goal and that's my dream.
Amazing. So, you won crowns, held degrees, broken stereotypes. What's the one personal victory unseen off the stage that you're most proud of?
I think the victory, I would say, it's a very small one, but and a very strange one, I would say, is that I have knee problem. Yes, because of some reason. There is no
Incident that made it occur?
yeah,
Or do you have?
or it's not like I was heavy
accident, yeah.
or nothing like. There's no trigger to it, but it's just there. So because of which I'm not supposed to do any heavy kind of
Workouts.
squats or lunges or things like that. So light is okay to some level. So I used to work out in a group. I love group workouts. And at that time, the trainer posed a challenge of holding a squat. And I was like, okay, I'm going to push myself. And I won that. I held a squat position for 45 minutes.
45 minutes?
45 minutes. Till date, I don't know how I did it, but that is something that is not many people know. But Harry, who's the trainer, he knows, and the other people who lost to me, they know. But that was something that I felt that it was a outstanding thing.
I think you're an overachiever. That's what has got you to all of this and actually get to the top of everything you've tried. You know, you really have to be.
Yeah.
It is a mindset, right? Because when
It
you
is.
have that achiever mindset, you're like, I'm going to achieve it no matter what.
I think more than achiever, I feel that I'm very internally motivated. That's what it is.
Amazing. That is so beautiful. And I hope people see this beautiful energy and this inspiring energy that I have seen today.
Thank you.
So, if you were to introduce yourself to me without mentioning your occupation, where you're from, your ethnicity, your nationality, your hobbies, which are all superficial markers that we use day to day life, how would you describe yourself to me?
A humane human being.
A humane human being.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Aditi,
Thank
for
you.
being so honest and having such a beautiful conversation. And I hope people pick up the right energy from this. Thank
I
you
hope
so
too.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Aditi Govitrikar. My path from medicine to psychology, including Vipassana, taught me one thing, that mind and body are inseparable. We have to start paying attention to mental wellness as much as we take care of our physical health. In this episode, I talk about simple practices that can bring balance to your life. Subscribe and join me on this journey.